all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Warning. The following podcast might be too truthful for most liberals. Listener discretion is therefore advised.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. This is Mark Galar, your host. Very special day. We have an old friend of the show, Dr. Jerome Corsi, back on with us to talk about his new book, The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. Dr. Corsi has written so many New York Times bestsellers, it would take the rest of the show to list them all. But when I think of Dr. Corsi, I think of the fact that he capsized John Kerry's hopes for the White House with his book Unfit for Command, and he did something he got Barack Obama to do something that no one else could get him to do, and that is release something that he said was his birth certificate back in 2011. He's here today to sort of help us connect the dots on neo-Marxism, Maoism, and anarchy, and how it relates to all the crazy stuff going on right now. Dr. Corsi, welcome back to the show. It's always a pleasure.
Mark, it's always my pleasure. Thank you.
Let's talk about Marxism, because that's really the underlying cause of all the craziness that's happening in America right now. Some people think liberals are just perverts, but the fact is, or maybe they're crazy or they have no common sense, but there's a lot more to it than that. The underlying theme is Marxism, and it goes back a long way. So I was wondering if you would be willing to sort of talk to us about the history of Marxism from its inception to the present day, and then tell us how it's impacting everything from BLM to critical race theory, the 1619 Project, transvestites in the kindergarten classrooms, and all the other nuttiness that's going on.
Well, I wrote this book to do just that, and the Democratic Party has essentially become a neo-Marxist party. I say neo-Marxist because the classical first version of Marxism failed. I mean, Marx thought in 1848 that the European nations would all have workers' revolts and that they would become communists. It didn't happen. Ultimately, the labor union movement shared wealth, capital wealth with workers. The theory failed. In fact, Russia going communist didn't fit anywhere in what Marx had really talked about. So the main thing that had developed in the evolution of communism was it became, after Italian communists, just before World War II, a guy named Antonio Gramsci, said, well, we've really got to attack the culture of capitalism. Do we want to destroy capitalism? And so it evolves, and the book goes through the political philosophy, because the point is these people, the woke, live in a different world than we live in. And if you don't understand the world they live in, you're not going to beat them. So it's fundamental to go through this exercise in order to realize just how insane they are. But the attacking the culture became the major theme, and that means getting rid of God, destroying the family, so that you break up the family one way or the other, through government action, that you collectivize things, but with the idea of the public good, which overrides individual freedoms. And once these ideas gain in society, it combined with what Mao did, which is Mao had a cultural revolution, which and many people don't remember, and many people weren't alive when it happened who were listening. The Red Guard went around with these little red books, shaking in their Mao's sayings, shaking in the face of anybody who, was an educator or had culture or religion. They destroyed the institutions. And the whole purpose of all of this communism, this Marxism and Maoism, cultural Maoism, was to destroy. They wanted to destroy modern industrial society. They did not mind killing millions of people. They were depopulationists. They really aimed to have a small group, namely themselves, control the power and have all the wealth of the society and implemented totalitarianism. But that's not the way they sold it. They sold it as a lie that, social justice is what we're after. We want to have everybody be equal. And in the United States, even going back into the 1920s, the early communists in the United States knew that race was a theme that they could use to heighten tensions because, the Constitution allowed slavery to continue. South, which is not willing to give up slavery, and compromise was made that the Union was formed under principles of individual freedom, but they didn't apply to blacks. Well, it took a civil war before that was remedied. But the whole evolution of condemning capitalism has become a very powerful argument that has combined with postmodernism. And I'll explain that in a minute. But I want you to understand that the fundamental goal of woke is to destroy. And they're doing a very good job of it, producing anarchy. You look at what's going on, the homelessness that are destroying our cities, open borders, and then they believe they can imagine their utopia, like John Lennon. Let's imagine a world without God. Let's imagine a world with no borders. Well, I'd prefer to imagine a world with no John Lennon.
You've got it.
And the postmodernism is another characteristic here, which came from a lot of the French intellectuals, Mark. And people won't know their names. I describe them in the book. I want to pick one in particular. His name was Baudrillard. These French intellectuals are very hard to read, but he wrote a book called Simulacra and Simulation. Now, that book got used in the Matrix movies, although Baudrillard did not like the Matrix movies. But what Baudrillard said is that there is no objective reality. Everything is subjective. So therefore, everything is a narrative. He invented a saying from Ecclesiastics, which is not an ecclesiastic. A simulacrum is like an imitation, a simulation. So it says a simulacrum is never what hides the truth. It is the truth that hides the fact that there is no truth. The simulacrum is true. In other words, he's saying that everything that we think is a devil's curse. Everybody was living in this matrix and they didn't realize it. He said, no, there is no group that perceives reality as it is, because he was a nihilist. He hated God. And so therefore, the postmodernists have told the woke that you can imagine society the way you want it. So imagine society without police, without borders. Imagine it without racism. Imagine that you can be whatever gender you want to be. Because, see, as soon as you say there's no objective reality, you allow everybody to posit that their subjective reality is truth. And whatever their subjective reality is, you've got to accept it. And there's a lot of crazy thinkers who have said that this forms a discourse that then evolves the new values. And if we allow the new values to evolve, these will be the values that perfect human beings into a new dimension where we become now the enlightened human beings. We become the ones who are truly free of all the chains put upon us by capitalism. And it gets into some fairly bizarre thinking where they take sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's their liberation. That's what they're really after. And the 1960s began implementing that as a culture here in the United States. It's only gained, and families are broken up. God is out of everywhere, and that produces anarchy. And that's what we're living right now. It's anarchy.
So basically, they want to get rid of Christianity. They want to get rid of the family unit. They want to get rid of most rules and laws. They want to put drag queens in kindergarten classrooms. The people at the WEF are suggesting that we should not only normalize pedophilia but legalize it. It almost makes the sex, drugs, and rock and roll stuff from the 60s look tame. Who would have thought it would get to this point?
Well, I've been writing about this for years. I've been writing books about, I wrote a book called The Bad Samaritan, which was about attacking the ACLU. And I wrote that about 10 years ago. I predicted that they would next go after pedophilia and then transgenderism. You can make up your own gender. Well, if we apply biblical principles to this and judge it by the fruit of the tree, they're mutilating children.
Yeah.
And the homeless are filling our cities. And downtown New York, all the hotels are being occupied by illegals, and it's costing the city, $50 billion a few years. Well, that's going to bankrupt our major cities. The pandemic, there's questions that have never been answered about the pandemic. And these people have a presidency, Donald Trump, on trial. These people are insane, but that's how destructive they are. They only want to destroy. And in history, Marxism has never been able to succeed in creative ways. It can't build, it can only destroy. And we're in the throes of that right now. That's what this book explains.
One of the things you talked about in the book is that the Marxists look for any dividing line that they can exploit. You talked about if it's Ireland, then they're going to do what they can to agitate the Catholic Protestant problem. And then you mentioned some other countries where they're going along certain lines. Any place they can agitate, any place they can cause a division, anything they can do to create rebellion, they do. And this is happening, from what you said in the book, on a global basis. And the storyline might be a little different in each country from what you said, but that's what they do. They go in and they look at the most vulnerable places that they can agitate, and that's what they do. Can you give us some examples of some of the other countries and what dividing lines they're trying to exploit in some of the other countries? I know Spain was one of the ones you mentioned.
Well, in Spain, of course, with the separatist movement, the Basques, and always have been, or even in Ukraine, the eastern part of Ukraine is Russian and the western part is German speaking. So they divide these two parts. And then Russia comes in and wants to protect the Donbass and the eastern part, which is Russian. And they want access to the Black Sea in order to get access to the Mediterranean and the Atlantic from the south. So Russia takes Crimea and Sevastopol. They like wars. They like disruption. They like the pandemic because it was lockdown. These groups are some of the big figures. Let's talk about Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse, who was very big in the 1960s. He wrote a book called Eros and Civilization. And he said, in another book, One-Dimensional Man, he said, the capitalist is a one-dimensional man. All they know how to do is drink beer and go to work, and drive a Chevrolet. And he wanted authentic human beings who could, have uninhibited sex. That was his major theme. These Frankfurt School, which were a bunch of German Jews who came out of Germany in the Weimar Republic between the wars. They escaped Hitler, were Marxists or neo-Marxists. They combined Freud with Marx, and they developed a theory that uninhibited sex was the way we would free ourselves from capitalism. And so therefore that begins the march down the road to saying gender is different from sex. And then you end up with transgenderism. And so everybody is combining all the sexes, and it's a mess. But that's what they intended. They intended for it to be a mess. It only leads to bankruptcy, economic failure. All these things are intentional. They are architecting us into a narrative which is not true. They don't care if it's true or not.
Right.
That's the fundamental point. Let's take the climate. They say there's a scientific consensus that global warming is happening, and by burning hydrocarbon fuels, we're going to destroy the planet. We won't be able to live. It'll be too warm. We'll have cataclysmic hurricanes and all kinds of other climate events that are disastrous. Well, none of that's true. And they know, the vast majority of credible climate scientists think it's silly. Carbon dioxide is a minor molecule in the atmosphere, 0.04%. Water vapor's 70% of all greenhouse gases. They don't demonize water vapor.
No.
Because hydrocarbons don't produce water vapor. They don't emit it. They want to get rid of hydrocarbon fuels because that'll destroy capitalism. And so therefore, when they say there's a consensus that scientists agree hydrocarbon fuels are causing global warming, they don't mean 100% of all scientists agree. They mean 100% of all scientists who see their utopian future agree. They agree with the idea, with the imagining. Look at all this. Let's reimagine police. Let's reimagine this. That all comes out of this postmodernism that got blended into this neo-Marxism and cultural revolution.
When you talk about climate change, you're talking about an area of science that is really a religion. And the reason I say that is because if you talk to any scientist that is a climate realist and ask them about the treatment that they have received at the hands of the climate alarmists, it's horrible. I mean, it's bullying at its worst, and they don't just want to disagree with you publicly. They want to make sure you don't get tenure. They want to come after your job. They want to ruin your life. We've even had people say publicly that anyone who doesn't believe in global warming should be eliminated, that they should be killed. And so when you start digging into it, and this show, I think I told you the last time you were here, used to be called Global Cooling Radio. And when you start digging into it, there's just no reason to be alarmed. The CO2 levels have been much, much higher than this, and that was during an ice age. So, I mean, there's just no truth to the fact that we're all going to boil over. But this is a way to go after capitalism. You make young people, and you talked about Gen Z and the millennials in your book, you make them feel guilty. You've got a car, your mom and dad have a car, you're destroying the planet, and then you give them a way to feel good about themselves by becoming Marxist revolutionaries. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, but to underscore your point, yes, they like to lie, and they don't care about lying. They will say anything. And not have any remorse about it whatsoever. One quick side note, you mentioned Antonio Gramsci. I had Liz Wheeler on a few weeks ago, and she was reminding us that his books, his prison notebooks, were translated into American English by Joseph Buttigieg, Pete Buttigieg's father. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And isn't it amazing, Dr. Corsi, that Pete Buttigieg ran for president and not one person asked him while he was in front of a microphone, do you subscribe to your father's ideology regarding Gramsci? I mean, it's amazing.
Well, it is amazing. This is the second volume of what I'm calling the Great Awakening trilogy, because I think when people see the results of all this, they're when they can't afford their homes anymore, and the homelessness are everywhere, and there's no police to protect you. I don't think anybody's going to care about what gender somebody is. The first book was The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. And these are all going to be called The Truth About. And that book said they're lying about climate change, and the points you just made are accurate. The second book is The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. This is why they lie. This is the intellectual justification for why they lie. They live in this reality. They believe what Marcuse said, that repressive tolerance. He said that we cannot tolerate these repressive ideas because they will put you in chains. And so therefore anyone who believes in God has to be ridiculed. We don't believe in sky fairies. There is no God. Well, it's fundamentally Garden of Eden, where Satan says, God made this place so it doesn't work, and he doesn't want you to eat that fruit, because then you know what he knows, and you could make this place better, and he doesn't want it made better. But if you listen to me, you'll eat the fruit, and we'll make this place great. Well, that's a lie. And the fundamental lie is very seductive. So when you tell people that their reality is the reality, you're following a long list of philosophers going back to Immanuel Kant in the 1700s in Germany, debating whether reality is objective or subjective. And if you say there are no God's laws, it's all value judgments, and one value judgment is as good as another value judgment. Now what you've done is you've authorized schizophrenia. You've said the inmates can run the asylum because the inmates say, we don't believe in your ideas. We believe in our ideas. You say, well, your ideas are, putting a pencil in your ear. That's a bad idea. You don't want to stick a pencil through your eardrum. It won't work. Well, these people believe that any crazy idea they come up with, which is liberating, you can't challenge, even with facts. You can't say the child that went through a sex operation mutilated their fundamental organs, and you're telling me a man can have a baby or a man can have a menstrual period? I mean, you're nuts. There is a fact-based objective reality that makes these ideas not work. And that's the fundamental finally realizes that the left created these ideas because they knew they didn't work, and all they wanted to do was destroy.
Well, the people are sick, and we see that all the time. It's my understanding that these men who identify as women are using ketchup packets from restaurants to simulate a monthly period. They are buying these babies that are somehow pushed into the anal cavity so that they can simulate giving birth. And apparently there's some sort of drug they can take that allows men to lactate. The only problem is the drug has been found to be harmful for children, but that doesn't keep some doctors from prescribing it. So, I mean, this is just the nuttiness at its highest form. Did you ever think, Dr. Corsi, that one day you would be on a podcast or a radio show and you would be discussing the fact that some people think it's okay to put a drag queen in a kindergarten classroom? I mean, why are we even talking about this? It's crazy.
I actually worried for a long time that this would happen.
Yeah.
And have seen the beginnings of it going back to when I was a child and watching some of the hearings and knowing where the communists were talking about. I just never thought it would gain the way it's gained, in the universities, or we can't get news anymore. I think we have some very powerful forces behind this, including the intelligence agencies, the CIA, which for some reason or other, these globalists want to destroy capitalism, which they know makes life productive for human beings. We should enjoy that we're in an interglacial warming period and that it's not the planet frozen entirely in ice, which it once was. Another 100,000 years, every 100,000 years, the Milankovitch cycles, we get in our elliptical orbit with the sun, we get farthest from the sun and we have an ice age. That'll happen again. I'm not looking forward to it. But these people are, take a look at they want you to eat bugs because cows fart methane.
Right.
Well, they don't want you to use nitrogen fertilizers because they say that's another greenhouse gas. Well, if you don't have nitrogen fertilizers, you're not going to grow the plants and you're not going to produce what we need to feed 8 billion people. Well, guess what? They don't want 8 billion people. We've had people show up at the World Economic Forum that said we'd be better off if we had the population of the world that was here in medieval times, which is reducing the population from 8 billion down to 2 million. They'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
And where they're going is transhumanism. They think they can perfect themselves into merging with artificial intelligence, and a few of the oligarchs will have everything for themselves, them and their machines, and they won't need the rest of us. We're all useless. We can all be replaced by machines. Well, this is insanity. And it is a direct violation. You cannot proceed down this path unless you believe there's no God. There's no consequences. And you can live forever, which is not the case. God, I would say in the end, God always wins. God created this reality. Any moment God wants, he can unplug it all. Poof, it's gone. You know,
I
and they don't realize they're going to die.
No, they seem to think they're going to live forever. Now, one thing about Marxists is that they don't hesitate to tell you that they want to get rid of the family unit and they want to get rid of a belief in God. I mean, they openly state it. And yet somehow, and you mentioned Gen Z and the millennials in your book, the millennials don't get that. I mean, I was talking to a millennial who never misses church and is on record as saying that she could never ever have an abortion. But at the same time, she votes for the political party that supports all this stuff, And I just don't know what happened to these generations. How, Dr. Corsi, did the Marxist take over the schools, take over entertainment, take over the courts? I mean, were we just asleep while this happened? How were they so successful at taking over so many different institutions within our society?
Well, first of all, it's a very seductive. This whole social justice theory that Marxism has evolved into is very seductive. So for the average Gen Z and average millennial, no one likes racism. No one says racism is good. Martin Luther King wanted race to be an unimportant characteristic. The human being was not the color the person had. It was who the person was inside. That's what Martin Luther King believed. These people don't believe that. These people believe they want to demonize whites as if whites are evil. And so, of course, you teach this to a kid and say, don't you have sympathy for blacks? Don't you have sympathy for the poor? Of course they have sympathy for the poor. Of course they want to help the poor. So they buy the part of it that's seductive, that they're out there for social justice. They don't want microaggressions. They don't want to be abused for who they are. They say, well, I'm a homosexual. I don't want to be abused for that. Well, how did we get here? The fundamental point was Marx was not an atheist. Marx hated God. He wished, he hated that he wasn't in charge. He hated that he couldn't perfect this place. The fundamental thing that is not taught any longer is that we are a failed species. We sin. The original sin is fundamental to the human being. But look at the 10 Commandments. You've got to tell somebody, don't lie, don't steal your neighbor's wife, don't kill people. Now, if you have to tell human beings this, just how morally alive and awake are human beings? You've got to do fundamental things to teach people morals. And if you don't start when they're kids, you don't have a chance.
Amen.
If they don't have mothers and fathers, if they don't have moral education, if they aren't taught about God, if they aren't taught from the beginning, you're going to die. And grandma's going to die, and grandpa's going to die, and mommy's going to die, daddy's going to die, and you're going to die. This place is not forever, and it has consequences. And how you behave here is important. And if you don't behave in a moral way, we don't have a chance. And look at what's turning out. Once people don't have God, they turn into beasts. And they don't mind killing other people. They don't mind bursting into stores and stealing everything. They don't mind random attacks. And they're filled with hate. And these are hateful ideas because you cannot have social justice the way Marxists do unless you start hating whites. You can't have, gender insecurity unless you hate people who don't like homosexuals. The reality of the world has always been homosexuals, and lesbians and transgenders, but they're about 1% of the population.
Right.
It's not a huge phenomenon. It's truly an aberration. It's for years studied as abnormal psychology, but then suddenly we can't demonize it. We'll hurt their feelings. Well, they have a right to be a homosexual. Why are we being so mean? They just love each other, and so you normalize perversion, and you it becomes a language perversion, because you turn against those people who are trying to, obey God's law, trying to understand that this is a moral place that we live in, and it's got moral rules, and that you can't violate the rules. You can't change Mother Nature because, you don't like hydrocarbon fuels. You can't kill billions of people because you think we're overpopulated. The Bible says, go forth and multiply. So this new book, or The Truth About Neo-Marxism, ends up in cultural Maoism. You attack God, you attack the family, you attack the culture. You magnify sex. You introduce drugs. You tell people they shouldn't have to work. Work is nasty. It's hard. You should just be provided for. You have a right to be provided for. And it ends up in anarchy. Because without the rules, without people realizing this is not meant to be paradise. This is not meant to be the Garden of Eden. It is meant to be what it is. And it's a world that Thomas Hobbes said is nasty, brutish, cruel, and short. Nasty, cruel, brutish, and short. And it has rules. You can't disregard the rules without creating chaos and destruction. And this idea of imagining the future, this John Lennon idea of it'll all be great and we can all tiptoe through the tulips. Forget about it. The world is not made that way. The world has consequences, which if the rules aren't followed, we're seeing lead to pandemics, they lead to wars, they lead to economic depression, they lead to middle class losing their homes. And what I'm saying, I'm writing this as the Great Awakening trilogy because I think these ideas are so destructive. I'm hoping people wake up to it before it's too late. And these people will accelerate their rush naked to the goal line. And they're happy to have a war develop in the Middle East that could turn into a thermonuclear war if Iran gets involved and if Israel decides they've got to take out Iran. Now, why wait? Because Iran's only going to get stronger. That war that's going on right now in the Middle East is very dangerous. But these people have been funding it. We've funded Iran. Obama, John Kerry, funded Iran and gave Iran a green light to build a nuclear weapon. How insane is that?
Very.
I wrote a book called Atomic Iran in 2005. I've been worried about this for almost 20 years now. And John Kerry said we should give Iran nuclear energy to see what they would do with it. I said, in that book, I said, Kerry ought to know what they do with it. They make bombs out of it. The same thing when Clinton said it would be okay for North Korea to have nuclear energy. And now the powers behind these people, the Marxists, knew that the ultimate evolution of this would be nuclear war. And that's okay with them because it destroys, and they are only satisfied when there's destruction. They can't create. Communism came into Russia. They killed 1 million people, millions of people, 30, 40 million people in the collectivized farm. Mao took over, and the Great Leap Forward, he killed 30 or 40 million people. You think Mao cared? His plan was to kill those people.
One of the things you point out in the book is that, how can I put this? Being able to distort words and rewrite history are important parts of the Marxist playbook. And we've seen so much of that. I mean, if you don't agree that the planet's going to boil over, you're a climate denier or a science denier. If you don't believe that 2020 had some integrity issues in terms of the election, then you're an election denier. They are trying to convince us that America's founding was in 1619, and that the only reason the initial colonies were set up was because people were trying to get to a place where they were sure they could continue on with slavery. I mean, it's complete nonsense, but rewriting history and redefining words seems to be a huge part of what they do.
It's fundamental. Language perversion is fundamental to them, to the communists, and to it's almost satanic. In other words, they want to explain how work is demeaning. Instead of work being productive labor that gives a person a purpose and has a value, they say, it's demeaning that you work and somebody else gets the value of your work. Well, I mean, the value is created by working. Value is created by activity that is productive. We could feed many more millions. You could feed them with hydroponics in the desert. The desert's got sun all the time. We could create the greatest resource in human beings, the scarcest natural resource is human beings, because human beings can create. It is not that we're going to run out of fossil fuels. No fossil ever made fuel. No fossil ever turned into oil. I point that out in the first book about the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. But again, these people create their own language. Remember, their reality is subjective. They make it up. So they make up a language world where they demean hydrocarbon fuels. They say they're dirty. They're going to emit carbon dioxide. Well, we emit carbon dioxide. We exhale it. Plants absorb it. In a natural cycle, if we did not have carbon dioxide, we wouldn't be on this planet, because plants depend upon carbon dioxide as plant food.
Right.
We didn't have photosynthesis. If we had less than 110 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we couldn't grow plants. And these people want to kill cattle because they're fart methane. I mean, it is insanity. And their whole language is, you're climate denier. So I write a lot about the perversion of language and how it's inherent in what they want to do. First, they pervert the language. They get rid of God. They pervert the language. And then they create their own language, which they insist you can't object to. So if you don't agree that hydrocarbon fuels cause global warming, you have to be banned from social media. And if you say that election looked like it was stolen, then you have to be prosecuted like they're doing with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump says this judge is not fair, he has to be gagged because he can't criticize the judge. Well, I go back to showing how some of the early writers like Howard Zinn, who did this, Marxist idea of American history, redefined everything. He defined Thomas Jefferson as a slaveholder and said he was a racist. He said that the founding fathers created the Constitution to impose a slave mentality upon blacks and continue power for themselves. He didn't take into account Abraham Lincoln's reading the Declaration of Independence into the Constitution by saying all are created equal. And Lincoln knew what he was doing. He knew the Constitution didn't do that. He had an Emancipation Proclamation. Civil War was fought over states' rights, but by the end of it, it was about the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, about freeing the slaves and giving them rights as human beings. But the Marxists have to pervert language. And that's what so the FBI now characterizes the protest at the Capitol on January 6th as an insurrection.
Right.
Okay, and so therefore it is a capital crime because these guys are not only terrorists, they're traitors. They won't accept the constitutional result of an election. Well, wait a minute. You mean all the ballots that we saw were being run through these machines, that didn't happen? The pro-Trump poll watchers were thrown out of the room and the ballots, that didn't happen? They had created all these dump-in for mail ballots and people didn't stuff them with thousands of ballots. That didn't happen. Well, we have video of it.
Zuckerberg didn't put all that money into the election?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
the FBI didn't hide the Hunter Biden laptop story because they were afraid it might hurt Joe Biden in the election. None of that happened.
All these intelligence chiefs didn't get together and say that this was Russian disinformation. Yeah, that didn't happen.
Apparently not.
The CIA has been at the heart of a lot of this. And what's the problem is that the Maoist insurgency concept is that you use political warfare that develop these narratives. They're not true, but they overwhelm the rule of law societies because it's easier for people to believe these narratives if they don't have education, if they aren't trained in science. And what the left wants to do is they want to keep its agenda hidden, camouflaged in the old lexicon of words, racism, but escalating radicalized agendas where they create these memes and these, these two homosexuals you mean they can't be lovers? They can't be friends? They just love each other. They're not doing anything wrong. Well, what sex acts are they committing? Well, we don't need to discuss that. They just love each other. Well, this child needs a gender transition. We can't let this child be the gender they think they are? Don't tell the parents. The parents are reactionaries. So we can't. So the narrative becomes so powerful and so seductive that people don't realize that the language perversion has reprogrammed them to engage in destructive behavior against their own children. The children say, "Mommy, why is that guy got a dress on? Why is he letting me see his genitals? What is it, Mommy? I'm scared by this. What is this?" The kids know the truth. The kids are the ones who said the emperor didn't have any clothes. It's the people who thought that he was naked, man, he had this beautiful, elaborate set of clothes woven for him that nobody could see. And then the establishment Republicans come along and they decide to go along with it, and you introduce corruption and pay everybody off at the top. And therefore, Biden gets protected by the FBI, and the FBI becomes politicized to go after Catholics who like the Latin Mass. Now, how messed up is all that?
Very.
And the average person's got to, when they do what they're going to do next, Mark, which is destroy the economy. And I'm writing, my podcast. Listen to me on thetruthcentral.com. I'm every day, every weekday, thetruthcentral.com. I'm getting out there and trying to explain to people the news in terms of this neo-Marxism and this cultural Maoism. So you can see the destruction, how they're going about it. I write in this book about, communists in the 1950s, Bella Dodd, who told exactly the agenda of what they were going to do and why she was a communist, and became ultimately convinced that they were all lying and all they really wanted was power. And so the book is a very important read because you've got to get to understand how this alternate reality was created intellectually. And it goes back 200-300 years. It was not accidental. It was not easy, but it was powerful. And it had, the power of Satan lies at the heart of it. And I do believe it is satanic.
I've said more than once that I feel like this is more than a battle between Democrats and Republicans, between left and right, between conservatives and liberals. This is a war between good and evil. Now, if you look at the way these people dress at these gay parades, and yet they bring children to them, you see parents bringing their kids to quote-unquote family-friendly drag shows. And then we find out that we're not allowed to call groomers because it might hurt their feelings, and we're just supposed to call them minor attracted persons because we're supposed to give a damn about their feelings when they're out there engaging in predatory sexual behavior with children. I mean, it's just off the charts nuts. And the other thing I've noticed about the Marxists, or the people that subscribe to a lot of this, is that they don't care about facts, Dr. Corsi. One of the things I do, and I've probably said to this point to the point where some of the people who listen to me are tired of hearing me say it, but I like to get them to back up what they're saying. When they say that the Earth is going to boil over due to carbon dioxide, I give them a blank sheet of paper and I said, write down all the reasons why you think that's going to happen. So far, nobody's written down anything. And I'm like, you said that with such conviction, and you can't even give me a single fact that makes you believe the world is going to boil over? Well, everybody said, no, 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 no. I'm not asking you what everybody says. I'm asking you what the facts are. And it's the same thing with a lot of things. I had a lady tell me that she was going to go to her grave believing that Donald Trump won in 2016 because of Russian collusion. And I said, why do you believe that? And she wouldn't answer the question. She said, well, let's just wait till the Mueller report comes out. So then the Mueller report came out. And I said, okay, the Mueller report's out. They couldn't find anything to substantiate that claim. And she said, I still am going to go to my grave believing that's the only way he could have beaten Hillary Clinton. And I said, you know what? I'm open-minded. Here's a blank sheet of paper. Write down all the proof you're aware of that Donald Trump colluded with Russia in 2016, and maybe you can change my mind. Couldn't write down a single thing. And so it's all about emotion with them.
Take a look at that minor attracted person.
Yeah.
As a construct. What it does is it normalizes it. It says, it makes, what does it mean? Okay, it means that a pervert can go after a child who doesn't even know what sex is yet and can sexually abuse that child. And for some of these people, the child can't be young enough. They're happy to abuse infants who don't even know what's going on. Okay, so you say that's a minor attracted person. Well, that makes it sound sympathetic. Oh, they just like children. They just want to cuddle up with children. No, that's not what they want to do, and they don't care that it's destructive to the child. The child maybe, you read these stories about the priest scandals, which are another major disgrace upon the Catholic Church, and these kids get their lives ruined. They get seduced by a priest. And, and the sex acts are not particularly nice or hygienic, but that doesn't matter to them because, again, they want to normalize their behavior, and it requires a language transformation to do it. That's why they're not interested in whether or not it's true. That's why they can't write down reasons, because human beings are subject to these mass phenomenon of delusions, where the delusions and these crazy ideas begin to captivate a whole society. And for a while they are powerful, they become a secular religion. So in the Middle Ages, they decided that all the women are crazy, so let's burn them at the stake as witches. Another crazy idea. Okay, so male-dominated society, they realize men are a little different than women. So the women are crazy, let's burn them at the stake. Bad idea. Burn women at the stake, how are you going to procreate children? Men aren't going to have children. I'm sorry. They're not going to have children. They're not built to have children. But that doesn't matter to these people because the fiction is the idea and the fiction is a lie. And the lie becomes very powerful. But the lie has to prevent itself from being examined because if it's examined, it will be exposed. So therefore, you have to not tolerate free speech. You have to get your law enforcement designed to go after anybody who's a truth teller. Talk about the Mueller investigation. This book, The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, got born in the days when Mueller wanted to put me in prison.
I was going to say I'm talking to somebody who lived that.
Yes. And they brought me to the grand jury. They thought I had a tie to Julian Assange and that I knew what Julian Assange's emails were, having been stolen by Russia, and that I told Roger Stone, who told Donald Trump, and then they colluded with Assange to release these emails at the most damaging part of the election cycle. Well, the truth is, I did figure out on my own that, that the Russians didn't steal the emails, and it was probably done from the inside. Mm-hmm. That whoever got in there and got those emails would have taken Podesta's, because he was the guy. I knew Podesta pretty well from studying him and from watching him in Washington. And I knew the kinds of things Podesta would do. And his emails, I pretty well did write some emails. With 2016, my 25th wedding anniversary, we took a trip to Italy. The airplane flight, I figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails. That's what he was teasing that he was going to release. I told that to Roger Stone. I made it sound like I had a source because I thought it would be crazy if I just said I figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a source. So they said, well, you lied to us, and we're going to give you a plea deal. You'll either go before a jury in Washington, D.C. You didn't give us your source, and they'll put you in prison for the rest of your life. You're in your 70s, and you'll die in prison. Or you just plead that you lied. Well, if I had pled that I lied, that's what they needed. That was the last step they needed to say that there was Russian collusion and that I told Trump because I had ties to Julian Assange. I said to them, go ahead and put me in prison the rest of my life. I will not stand before God and a judge and swear to a lie to keep myself out of prison. I'll die in prison. But that's the choice. I'll die in prison. They did not indict me. That's why I'm writing these books about truth. I'm telling people, tell these people the truth. The truth will set you free. And the truth is what will defeat these people. What will also defeat these people is the fruit of the poisonous tree. When they see what these people produce, they will see the evil. And if you want to live that evil, which will show up on your doorstep, invading your home when you don't have a gun, and destroying your children when you can't protect them, that's where it'll go.
You mentioned the Catholic Church a while ago, and there was a part of the book that really resonated with me, and that's when you had some things that Pope Francis had said and done. And you had said that Pope Francis blamed capitalism for much of the world's pain, death, and destruction, and referred to it as the dung of the devil. You said that Pope Francis sneered that market capitalism and neoliberalism are magic theories and blamed them not only for the spread of the coronavirus, but also for inequality in general. Also, Pope Francis blamed the ghastly murders of Europeans by Muslim immigrants, as well as the creation of ISIS, on the world's alleged worship of the god of money, and referred to capitalism as the terrorism against all of humanity. And he also got onto Trump for wanting to build a wall because he said building a wall is not Christian, even though there's a wall around the Vatican. So not entirely happy with this Pope, but how do these kind of crazy ideas penetrate the Catholic Church? I mean, how do we have the top guy in the Catholic Church making anti-capitalism comments?
Well, because the Catholic Church has been penetrated by Marxism, and we've been warned about this for a long time. You can't have, if you have a priesthood that says that you have to be celibate and you get access to little boys, any pedophilia, anybody inclined to pedophilia reads that message as pedophiliacs welcomed here. Apply here. This is your job. This is what you get to do. We can't design things that are inherently appealing to the worst nature of people, human beings. And the corruption is massive. I caught HSBC the 2011 money laundering because they were taking accounts. They were running millions of dollars through your account with your social security number and then closing the account. I got contacted by the Department of Homeland Security and by the Senate Permanent Investigating Committee. HSBC paid a $1.9 billion fine. Nobody went to jail. Why? Because you can't run the drug cartels without a bank. You can't drive around semi-truck full of $100 bills. And so therefore, we are the drug cartels. That money is, all wire transfers are monitored by the Treasury and other agencies, and we let it go on because it's lucrative for the banks. Banks launder money. We know they launder money. Why is the border opened and the drug cartels operating? We are the drug cartels. The OSS and the CIA have been in the drug business since inception. And you don't think they know where the drugs are being run? They run the drugs. So we have now got a criminal government. And if the corruption, Joe Biden's corruption, why doesn't it get investigated? Because Mitch McConnell is married to Elaine Chao, whose family is worth beaucoup millions of dollars in China. And that family wouldn't be allowed to live if Mitch McConnell didn't do China's bidding. And he gets paid handsomely for that. And you get a few honest ones, Jim Jordan. Uh, I think the current speaker is a good candidate, Johnson.
Yes.
Matt Gaetz. You get a few honest ones, and the truth is what will set them free. I'm writing books that are talking about the truth. I've been through the fire of these people. They tried to imprison me to silence me. I refused to buy their lie, and they backed down. They were the liars, and they knew it, and I called them on it, and they had to back down. And so now I'm writing books about it. My book Silent No More, which explains that experience. This book, The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, which shows the bizarre, twisted world in which they live. Capitalism has brought prosperity to the world, and they hate it because it's brought prosperity to the world. They would prefer to be the kings and have everybody else be the serfs. They don't want a middle class. Capitalism produces a middle class. It shares the wealth. They hate that because you can't control the people. If the people are able to be productive, moral, are raised correctly with good values, you have to pervert it. This is a historic perversion, and it is satanic in nature. It stems from the principles that go back to the Garden of Eden.
When you talk about how crooked the government is and that we've got various departments running drugs and covering up for banks that launder drug money, and then we take a look at what's going on with all of the craziness with operating on kids and cutting off their private parts at such a young age, it just feels, it almost makes the 60s look normal. If I could do, yeah. So what I have to ask you is just an average everyday citizen, Dr. Corsi, is, are we past the point of no return? Have we crossed the Rubicon, or can we still do something? I mean, being aware. Go ahead.
I think we can still do something. I mean, I'm increasingly ending I do a podcast, as I said, every weekday, thetruthcentral.com. Everything I'm doing is about the truth, thetruthcentral.com. And I'm ending it by telling people that God's given us a solution to this problem, which is 2 Chronicles 7:14, which says if we get on our knees and atone for having let the world get to this place. I mean, we let the court take God out of the schools going back to the 1940s. We let the AFDC program going under Lyndon Johnson when Pat Moynihan said this will break up the black family. And Pat Moynihan was demonized for saying that. He was right. We let that happen. The 2 Chronicles 7:14 says God will hear our prayer and heal our land. We're going to go through a judgment of God, and it's not going to be fun. But I don't think God created this place to fail. God created this place to succeed, and it's dependent upon a few people to understand that. I mean, the story about Abraham and Sodom and Gomorrah, which is, God comes, Abraham says, well, if I can find X number of people that are righteous, will you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? And God said, yes. Well, he goes and tries. Well, how about if you take a few less? God said, I'll take a few less. Well, you can't find it. The point of that story is if Abraham had found one, God might have spared 2 cities. The point is one person can change the world. And I'm writing these books to get the truth out there and to beg people to do 2 Chronicles 7:14 and to come to their senses, to realize how insane this is. Do you want to live in this bizarre world? I wrote this whole book on culture, the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. That's the book. In order to show you that the results of this are war, millions of people die. If you follow this thinking, it is destructive, and it was meant to be destructive, and it was put in place to destroy by people who wanted to destroy, so they could be in power.
I mentioned this last time, but I'm going to mention it again. As I was following the whole Mueller investigation thing on television, and I saw that you had stood up to them, I don't know that I have the words to express how proud I was of you for doing that. I mean, that took courage. That took courage. People are telling you you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail if you don't sign this paper, which is a lie, and agree to this. And you look them in the eye and say, I won't sign it. Go ahead and throw me in jail. I mean, a lot of us would like to think that we would do the right thing, that we would do that in the moment, but the truth is most of us wouldn't have the courage to do it. So, again, I congratulate you for that. I thank you for that. What an amazing example to people everywhere as to how to
Well,
handle that situation.
I didn't do it to get praised. I
I
didn't do
know.
it. I did it because I had no choice. I could not lie to God and would not lie to God. And so, therefore, yes, it was difficult and it had consequences that I'm still feeling today. It actually ended up ruining my marriage.
Oh no. I
Going through
wasn't
32 years married, and now I'm going through a divorce. My wife decided to have an affair. And it, it was the whole experience was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever been through. And the federal government wants to put you in prison and destroy your life, wants to, you know, rip out all your money. And it sits outside the house with CNN waiting for me to be arrested by the FBI and kind of raid they did to Roger Stone.
mm-hmm.
You know, with the surveillance I was under, where the Mueller team told me, the prosecutors said that they could see when I was writing an article, the keystrokes I was using on my computer and what I was browsing at the time. They had me under that tight surveillance. It is living hell to go through what the government, federal government, can put you through. Then they want you to lie in order to preserve their case. Well, I couldn't do it. They picked the wrong guy. I thought the FBI was good on profiling. They should have figured me out before they pressured me like that. I told them not to do it. I came in there to tell them the truth, and the truth was I didn't have a tie to Julian Assange. And when they wanted me to invent one, or invent one by saying I lied and to scare me into taking a plea deal, I wouldn't do it. But I knew how destructive these people are. I knew how corrupt they are. And I knew they would ultimately destroy. And so now we're playing that out on a big scale. How can you have a president who's demented? It's insane. Biden should be removed from office mercifully because he is not mentally competent. He should be removed from office with malice because he's a criminal. And you've got a criminal president that's being defended by a criminal FBI and a criminal intelligence agency. And we wonder why there's fentanyl coming across the border. These people destroy, they kill. They'll have millions of people in the streets as homeless, but they'll destroy the middle class, they'll put more people in the streets as homeless. And finally, people are going to, and then they'll try to take guns away from people, and they'll fly terrorists in on these glider machines that they did with Hamas. And what are you going to do to defend yourself when the guns are gone?
I have never believed throughout my, and I'm 60 now, so that shows you how time flies since the old Obama vital statistics days. But I have never in my life believed that gun control had anything to do with preventing murders at all.
It doesn't.
Without guns, we're wide open for tyranny, and that's why they want our guns. It's
Well,
the
those people in Israel, the left took away the guns,
mhm.
made it hard to have a gun. Well, those people were completely defenseless, and they were butchered. And you go into New York City today, you don't know whether you're going to be assaulted, and if you are assaulted, if anybody will do anything about it. You don't know if you're going to be. You go into the stores don't have goods on the shelves because they're afraid of how much they're going to be stolen.
Right.
So you go to a CVS. I was just in Washington, going to a pharmacy. I got a picture of the thing. You got to call somebody to go get it because they don't want it stolen off the shelf. And there's no consequences to stealing. California, there's no consequences to theft.
Right. You have to steal over $1,000 or something, right?
Yeah, and otherwise it's not a crime. And then if the criminals come in, the judges and the prosecutors put in place by Soros have been conditioned to think that the person's a criminal only because they've been abused by capitalism. They're victims.
Right.
They're the ones who are victims. And so therefore they're not responsible for their crimes. Well, you tell that to a criminal and you've just given them a green light to kill murder. These people have been done. How many times have they raped and been let out of prison? How many times have they been killed people? What are they going to do again? They're going to rape and kill again.
Sure. In New York, they let them out with a no bond, and then within a couple of days, they've killed somebody. It's ridiculous. And
then
go ahead.
And they kill your child or your spouse or you. Suddenly there's nobody there to protect you. That's the society they want to create, because at that point society collapses, and then they can eliminate the World Economic Forum oligarchs who think they can exist. With the third book will be about transhumanism, artificial intelligence, perpetual life extension. That's what these people think they can achieve. At heart, they deny that this is a spiritual experience with consequences. They killed 8 billion people. They left a few 100,000 or a few million that were them and their machines. They think that would be just fine. No, you think Hitler ever lost any sleep over killing 6 billion Jews?
No.
I doubt
it. I have to tell you that there's so many people out there who don't get it. They don't understand that communism is bad. I had one young lady tell me that Karl Marx had the right idea. It's just that no one had really implemented communism correctly. And
the truth is they all implemented it correctly, and if they understood communism, they understood Karl Marx. Karl Marx wanted to destroy. He was angry at God for creating this world and not putting him or Satan at the center of it. He didn't like that he was going to have to die. He didn't like that he had to work. He didn't like that he had to clean himself up. He lived a miserable life, refused to support his family, lived in poverty, begged money to survive, and kept writing this stupid book at the London library, Das Kapital, which is inherently almost unreadable. A lot of this stuff is unreadable because, again, they're so mentally confused. They're creating this artificial reality. I mean, try reading people like Baudrillard. And it takes a lot of discipline just to figure out what these people are talking about. Same thing as if you study what schizophrenics write. Hard to figure out what they're talking about. So when you get the mentally ill, creating a powerful ideology that's seductive based on social justice, where no one would endorse racism. I mean, no one would say that two men who loved each other, should be broken up. Okay, but the reality is you can't normalize that and make that everybody. So 1% of the population goes there. So, I mean, you're going to get some deviance. Statistically, you're going to have deviance in any group phenomenon. But the deviance shouldn't be normalized. Deviance shouldn't be made the norm. It shouldn't become the modal case. That perverts statistics.
Absolutely. Well, you've been very generous with your time today, sir. I greatly appreciate you coming on again. You've got a place here whenever you want. Just give me a call whenever you have something that you want to discuss. Once again, the name of the book is The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. It's a very good book. It really traces Marxism from its inception to where we are now, brings in a lot of the players so that you can see all the different people that contributed, and frankly is the book you need to read if you really have said all your life, well, I really don't understand this. I've heard of Karl Marx and I know about communism, but I really don't have the big picture yet. This is the book you want to read because you will have the big picture when you're done. And of course, this is only book 2 in a trilogy, so we've got that to look forward to as well. Dr. Corsi, thanks for being on the show. And if there's anything we've left out, anything else you want to say, I assume you can buy this wherever good books are sold. But if there's anything we've left out, anything else you want to mention in the book, go ahead.
No, we put the paperback and the hardcover out at the same time.
Okay.
And it's readily available on Amazon and all the other outlets. It should be in the bookstores. And I always enjoy being on your program, Mark. And It's a great honor to be with you, and I admire your audience.
Hey, thank you so much.
And this is a battle we can win, and ultimately God will. I always concluded by saying, in the end, God always wins. God will win here too, but the consequences will be much more severe if we don't all come to our senses and follow 2 Chronicles 7:14 now.
Before you go, tell us about your podcast again and how people can listen to it.
It's thetruthcentral.com, thetruthcentral.com, and it's on every weekday.
Okay. At what time? Or is it just...
It's on so many different channels. We put it on, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Rumble, it's on BitChute. I mean, it's out there. It's everywhere. And you can listen to it as audio only. And there's just so many different channels. I think we even live stream it on X now. So it's out there.
Okay.
And you can watch it whenever you want to watch it. I do it very early in the morning, and it's each day's and on our website we have past episodes, and I think the website's very robust. I encourage people to take a look at it. thetruthcentral.com. I
would encourage people to look at it as well. Once again, Dr. Corsi, thanks for being on the show, and thank you for your patriotism.
My great pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger. Because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.